So we got a strange one. Annihilation by VanderMeer. It's a very short novel. Interestingly, it's part of a trilogy that was all released, all published at the same time. And I imagine all three of them, if they're all of similar length, could just be read all together, just like one normal size book. Anyways, I literally just finished this, and I just sat down and read the second half of it in one sitting, so I'm still processing it. But it's a strange one. It's very good, very good. It's like a sci-fi horror, but sort of a horror in the sense that I appreciate horror, with a lot of mystery and bizarre otherworldliness and sort of eldritch horror and body horror and biological horror, and a lot of unknowns and mysteries and stuff that don't get solved totally. So the whole thing is written as events being told after the fact by the main character, the protagonist, the point of view character. She's telling the events that have happened to her right up to this point. She's writing it all in a journal. It's not written like journal entries. It's written like she's telling a story, but she's writing it in a journal. And at the very end, she says, like, "I'm leaving this journal for whoever comes after me. Don't look for me. I'm moving on," sort of thing. And it's really cool because it's not her descent into madness, although it kind of is. I don't think she goes mad though, although maybe she does. And but like she writes, she doesn't write about the changes that are occurring to her until about halfway through. She says, "Okay, I haven't been totally honest with you. These things have been happening to me, but I haven't told you because I wanted you to be objective and take me at my word, and I don't think you'd believe me if I told you the whole truth. But here it is," sort of thing. Anyway, so the setting is there's this area called Area X. I know, really original name, but it fits it. And something strange has been going on in this area for the past 30 years. The government's playing it off as an environmental disaster and have blocked it off. And they send these expeditions in to investigate. And we follow the supposedly 12th expedition, which are led by 4 people, none of whom we are ever named. They are referred to only by their professions. We have the psychologist, the anthropologist, the surveyor, and our main character, the biologist. And so it starts with them having past the border, whatever the border is, some liminal transitional space in between, I want to say, our world, normal space, and Area X. And they enter Area X, and immediately things start going awry. They go to the base camp that had been set up by the previous expeditions. They start noticing weird things and having weird feelings, and they discover this thing that the biologist always refers to as a tower, and like insists that it's a tower, even though it is a hole in the ground. That everyone else in the expedition refers to it as the tunnel or the well or something. And so they go down into it. The biologist inhales some spores, and that's what sets off her whole change. All the things that are happening to her is from inhaling these spores. These spores are given off by this sort of weird moss that is written in like English language Latin script. These sort of not quite nonsense, but very weird text that's scrawling and scrolling and goes down and down and down this tower. It's so hard to explain because even reading the book they don't explain it. But there's this text, and they're like, "Wait, why is there English language text written in this like creepy language?" And it's written in moss, and inside the moss are these like these like creatures, these hand-like pale tiny creatures, which I think are like aliens. Um, anyways, so they go back up, and the psychologist is there, didn't go down with them, and they go back to base camp and go to sleep. They wake up the next day, and the anthropologist is gone. The psychologist is like wounded and looks harried, and she sends. She's like, okay, surveyor and biologist, you got to go back down into that tunnel. Yeah, you got to do it. Oh, the anthropologist just left. She just was scared and went back to base camp, to the border, and left. So they go down. The psychologist stays at the top. The biologist and surveyor go down the bottom. They follow this line of text. They're wearing masks this time. They follow this line of text curve. I imagine it curving, going down and deeper, and they come across. They see footprints on the ground, that someone had been down and had left, and they find the body of the anthropologist dead and like covered in this moss or something. And it turns out that whatever is writing this script in this tower, in writing it in like moss, seems to have attacked and killed the anthropologist, and it seems like the psychologist was there, and fled, and probably made the anthropologist do this. So they go back out and confront the psychologist, and it turns out she's hypnotized them all. They're all like hypnotized so that they don't remember the passage through the border. They don't remember. They have some suppressed memories, and they are very controllable. She has key phrases she can say to get them to obey her, to be at calm, and title of the book, Annihilation, is the code for sort of a self-destruct button, causing people to immediately commit suicide. So they confront the psychologist about what's happened, and they're like, why did you force the anthropologist to go down and die? Anyways, so it's like the psychologist knows something, but isn't revealing it. So then the next day they wake up, the psychologist is gone. It's just the surveyor and the biologist. And the biologist then says, okay, we have to like explore further and find out where the psychologist is and what's going on. But the surveyor's like, no, what the heck, we gotta get out of Dodge. The surveyor's like the only normal person in this whole thing. But anyways, the biologist, who at this point is starting to describe some things happening to her. Eventually she becomes she begins to call a brightness within her. It's sort of giving her more energy and sort of increasing her strength and stamina and whatnot. Anyway, so she goes off on her own down to the lighthouse. There's this lighthouse that all the other expeditions had talked about, and there's like a dilapidated, abandoned town by this lighthouse. So she goes to the lighthouse, and there was some sort of a scuffle there, a battle, lots of blood, death, lots of bullet holes and bullet casings everywhere, ostensibly from one of the previous expeditions. And then all the other expeditions have ended in people killing themselves, people just leaving and saying there's nothing there, nothing happened, it was totally normal, people just disappearing, people going crazy, all sorts of different things. And throughout this book, we're getting it's interspersed with sort of not flashbacks, because she's narrating this story, but she'll tell about her life before Area X, and mostly to do with her husband, whom she had a very bad relationship with. Their marriage was falling apart, and her husband, it turns out, was a medic on Expedition 11, the expedition before hers, and he had disappeared, but suddenly out of the blue had showed up at her house one day. But he seemed very sort of almost not lobotomized, but he didn't seem like himself. He seemed very plain. Whenever she asked him what happened, like, how did you get here? What about the expedition? He would just sort of say, oh, I don't know. There's nothing really happened. It was fine, whatever. They like made love, and then eventually, I don't know, a couple days after he showed up, the authorities, the Southern Reach, the government agency running Area X, or trying to understand Area X, shows up and takes him away. They interview him, whatever, forever, and then he dies of cancer. So it's later revealed that this was not her husband. This was a recreation replica doppelganger of her husband that had been created by Area X, which had sort of taken his cells and his DNA and his pattern and mimicked it and sent it out into the world as a sort of ambassador or as an explorer or something. And I'm waiting this whole time for, because they made love, she made love with this alien creation thing, that it's going to be revealed that she had a kid in the intervening before she left for the expedition, and this kid is like some sort of hybrid alien human. But that's not the case. Now, this is a movie that I did see a number of years ago, but of course, with my memory, I don't really remember what happens. I remember, yeah, I vaguely remember. So I don't know if that happened in the movie or why I was thinking that, or if I'm thinking of a different movie or whatever. Anyways, so yeah, so she's at the lighthouse. She finds a photo of the lighthouse keeper, and for some reason, she thinks it's really important. So she keeps it. Like the lighthouse keeper from 30 years ago, before Area X was a thing. She discovers a cache of journals from previous expedition members, but there's so many of them. There's dozens and dozens and dozens of them. There's way more than the supposed 12 expeditions, and she sort of realizes that this has been going on for far longer, and that they haven't been told the whole truth. And the psychologist probably knows some of it, but she can't find her. And she sees the psychologist on the beach near the lighthouse. Turns out the psychologist thought she saw something, got scared, and jumped out of the top of the lighthouse and basically killed herself. But she's still breathing by the time the biologist goes down to her and manages to talk to her for a bit, but doesn't really get any answers. She does find the journal of her husband, which she talks about, and it sort of doesn't reveal anything other than that there's sort of more to this whole thing than they've been told. Her husband says in his journal that he's going to repair a boat and go down the coast, explore this island that he saw, and then keep going. So that's what she ends up doing at the end of all this, is she gets a boat and goes to try and follow her husband's footsteps. But she talks to the psychologist a bit. The psychologist dies, and before saying, like, you are glowing, burning, aflame, you have changed, whatever. So the psychologist dies, and the biologist does like sort of an autopsy and sees that the psychologist has this sort of green moss stuff growing all over her. So she's been infected with it also. So whatever this thing is that's causing change, it seems to be some sort of a fungal, or at least via fungal spores and a fungal factor. So anyway, she goes back to base camp, and on her way, she gets sort of almost attacked by this creature that lives in the reeds that is like bestial. I pictured it as a bear, because I think in the movie it's a bear, but with like a human face and human features. That she says it reminds her of one of the members of the previous expedition that she saw in an interview during her training. So it seems like that is one of the previous members that has turned into this beast, and it sort of tries to chase her down, but she escapes it because she's super fast from whatever she is inhaled and whatever is changing her body. And she gets back to base, near to base camp, when the surveyor, who is ex-military, shoots her a couple times. But because of her super fast reflexes and senses, she sees this coming and is able to move in such a way that she gets shot in two places but doesn't get killed. And the brightness inside her, this sort of alien whatever fungal infection, like quickly heals her wounds and stops her from dying. And she ends up shooting and killing the surveyor, which it seems like the surveyor is the only normal, not deranged person in this. So then she's back at base camp. She's studying some stuff. She sees that most things are normal. Her cells seem normal. The psychologist's cells seem normal. But some of the moss cells and some of the fox cells are actually human cells. So there's something with, like she saw dolphins in a canal that had human eyes. There seems to be some blending of human and non-human things in this Area X. So she's had this compulsion to go back into the tower, this sort of underground tunnel thing forever, and so she finally relents, gives in, and goes down, goes all the way down, and meets the crawler, she's called it, this thing that's been writing in moss on the walls, and when she meets it, it's like she can't comprehend what it is. Its shape is constantly changing. It's glowing with golden light, then of this blue-green light, and the light is so much, and the light is almost physical, and then it's growing into this great big wall, but it's got these things. It's just like, but at the same time, there's this hand thing that's always writing, and this sort of head thing that's always writing. Anyway, so she tries to turn around and leave, but then it jumps onto her, breaks into the bone of the back of her skull, and reads her brain, and basically tears her brain apart neuron by neuron, and then rebuilding it to sort of memorize and understand the pattern of her. And it's described as like intensely painful, but she somehow survives it, probably because she's already been infected with the moss whatever fungus that has kept her alive. So she sort of passed this test, and the crawler goes back to writing on the wall. She stumbles down further and goes further down this tower, and then at the very bottom she sees this door to light, this blinding light door, and she's trying to get closer to it, but it's just too much. Whatever it is, it's causing her to be nauseous and anxious and stressful, and everything in her is telling her not to go any closer. So she does turn around and go back, even though she's going back towards the crawler. She goes back and sees the crawler again, but this time, because it's already sort of taken her into itself and memorized her pattern or whatever, it lets her go. So she just goes and exits and goes to the lighthouse, writes this sort of diary entry, which is this book, and then leaves. And she sort of speculates at the end that that the tower itself is some sort of a thorn that's of extraterrestrial or extra dimensional, extraplanar origins that has embedded itself in the earth and is creating this miasma, or these spores of whatever that is created Area X, and it's slowly expanding as the crawler, who turns out to be the lighthouse keeper. She recognizes the face. Originally was the lighthouse keeper, but has been transformed by this tower thing to become an agent of it, is writing this scrawl that goes all the way down to the bottom, and once it reaches the bottom, some sort of energy blooms forth and the borders expand. And then it starts all over again, and they send in new expeditions, and the crawler crawls down and writes all this stuff, and so forth, so on and so forth. Again, I know this makes no sense unless you've actually read this, in which case it probably still doesn't make sense, but whew, it's something else. But it's really good, because it does give you that really weird sense of unease and horror that you don't get in reading something that like spells stuff out for you. The sort of lack of answers and the lack of understanding and trying to wrap your mind around what you're reading really lend themselves to the unsettling nature of this book. And I'd love to read the other two. I'm going to have to at some point. I don't have them on me right now, but I'm really curious where this goes. I might have to watch the movie again, because it's like it could go, I don't know where it could go, but hopefully there will be more answers in the later two books. Yeah, it's also neat because the biologist, the main character, sort of, usually in these books, the characters are sort of not stupid, but they don't think of things that the reader thinks about. But as we're reading this and you're starting to think, oh, maybe that's not actually your husband, the biologist is also thinking, okay, it's probably not my husband. It's probably some mimic that has had its genetic pattern absorbed and recreated. Like the biologist is not afraid of thinking of crazy outlandish theories that are probably true, when I think most other characters in books would shy away from them because they would be like, I don't want to think about that because that would upset my worldview and make me go crazy. But maybe because the biologist is already going crazy in a way, although I don't think they are crazy. They are just changed. But they do think about these things, and I just think they knew about as much as I knew. Which I think was really cool. There's no sense of dramatic irony where I'm like, oh, I know things, or I can think of things or hint at things that these characters cannot. These characters are on the same page as you, which maybe lends to that mystery and that sort of that horror, creepy weirdness to the whole thing. It's just a really weird book, but really good book. So that's Annihilation by Jeff VanderMeer, the first book of the Southern Reach trilogy.